Trapped in time, surrounded by evil, low on gas. Here's your relook at the NECA Cult Classics Series 5 Medieval Ash Williams. Cult Classics Medieval Ash figure from the hilarious and action-packed Army of Darkness comes none other than clueless hero Ash in his medieval outfit. Available from NECA, Ash is fully articulated and stands 7 inches tall. Accessories include the shotgun or boomstick to all you primitive screwheads, alternate stretch head, and grave display base. Before we go ahead and do all that looking at Ash Williams again part, the first thing we're going to do is figure out how tall the figure stands. I'm going to take my Ultra Measuretron 5000, that's the name of my tape measure, and put it at the very top of Cult Classics Ash, stopping it right there at what I believe to be the top of his head, and regurgitating it to you, members of the mob. You're looking at a figure standing 6.9 inches in height. And in centimeters, that works out to be a figure standing 17.7, a little over 17.5 centimeters tall. Now the reasoning why I'm sure you're experiencing a sense of deja vu as to why we're having a look at this figure again, the topic did make the rounds as to what my favorite Ash figure was released by NECA, and while you may have suspected it may have been more their later released Ash figures from the likes of, say, the Ultimate line, you can actually backtrack a little further back, and then a little bit further back, and then even a little bit further back from that. It's actually from the Cult Classics line that is still my favorite Ash figure, and we're going to have a look at him right now. Of course, before examining the figure, let's examine the accessories that come included with the figure. To say they just don't do things like they used to certainly can be true when it comes to the Cult Classics line. The stuff that we're getting now, yes, is good. Yes, is super articulated, super detailed, but it does lack a bit the charm that I feel the older Cult Classics brought to the table. Case in point, if you look at, say, for example, the display stand that comes included with this Ash, I mean, you don't get this stuff anymore, and it feels saddened a bit. I feel saddened a bit, the fact that we don't get stuff like this included with our figures, dioramas, or little small standees that you can put the figures with. Here we, of course, have part of the graveyard with a skull at the top there, a few hands, roaming hands looking out to reach off and grab Ash's boots. Again, it's a really nice detailed base. Just kind of wish we could get stuff like this nowadays. You can take the figure very carefully. This side's not so much the issue because there's a lot of clearance to work from, but this side right here, because you have these hands sticking out, you want to be careful when you feed the feet underneath it, or at least this one foot. You just peg it underneath like that, and then follow it up by taking his brethren and just plug that into the other foot peg, just like so. And you've got yourself, like I said, a nice showcasing way to display the figure. Truthfully, actually, the figure stands fine on its own, despite the fact that it has a side step to it, like, you know, one leg is a little bit further front than the other, and the fact it has no articulation to speak of, at least on his lower half. He does stand fine, I mean, like I said, but I do feel like this enhances the experience of having this on display, where you've got Ash now with a pretty cool looking display stand. This is a figure that's been displayed in my collection for the longest of times. Even when I put away figures, this is the one figure that stays always behind. And there's a reasoning for it. Again, just one of the best Ash figures, if you ask me. I did sort of say he could stand on his own. Truthfully, it just does involve a little bit of twisting of those ankles so that you kind of counterbalance the fact that he has one leg stretched forward. Let's have a look at the other accessory that comes included with the figure. He comes with his boomstick. The boomstick is good, although I do feel like it's a bit long in the barrel. It's got some nice coloring to it, some real vintage grain work done both to the handle and the undercarriage of the gun. It's got some nice coloring to it, despite its age, really, when you think about it. These pieces predate so many of the stuff that we're getting nowadays. It could pinpoint, of course, the time frame in which these could come out, but to be honest, I draw a complete blank. But I do remember going to my local Toys R Us and seeing visibly these on store pegs, and I was able to pick one up at Toys R Us, I think, through that means. Anyways, though, for the boomstick, you can obviously fit it into Ash's one hand. The hand that sort of is designed for the trigger. Now, obviously, it's not going to be the mechanized hand on the one side. We can make use of that at a later date, but what we're going to do for the time being is we're going to just take the boomstick and feed it in between the fingers, And then you're going to just take the trigger finger, as do your best to do this, get that right around the trigger. And that is how you can display the figure with the gun in his hand. To be fair though, it's disappointing in the fact that you don't have articulation in the arm. I mean, yes you do and you don't. You do in the way that you can at least rotate the arm, but because you don't have hinges yet introduced to these figures, you don't have the means to actually bend the elbow, which would have certainly been a nice touch. If you also would like to display Ash without the boomstick, you can simply just take that off of his hand, spin the figure around, locate on the back the holster there, and just slide that down in the back there, just like that. The downside, though, is I guess it could still look like he's trying to point at something. It doesn't seem like he's robbed of an accessory, so at least there's something there, and you can always, of course, drape the hand down, but it does look like he should really be holding something, shouldn't he? It's unfortunate that this particular figure never included a Necronomicon, which seemed like a logical thing to have come included with the figure. Of course, the majority of the film is all about him summoning the spell wrong and uttering in and bringing in the dead. Now, for the time being, of course, I've got the Necronomicon Ex Mortis I've pulled from the recently looked at NECA Toys 2-pack, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second. This set came with a really impressive Necronomicon that you could actually open up the page, at least to expose one page on either side. Nice detailing done. I know it's not really part of this figure, but the purpose of why I brought this in is certainly you can make use of this and just sort of wedge it in between his hand. Does it fit in his hand? No, because it's not really designed to hold it. But you sort of can pull off somewhat the same effect just by resting it onto his four fingers and sort of allowing the thumb to kind of hold the back spine of the book. When it came to displaying this figure, actually for a while, I had him displayed with the Necronomicon that came from this set. Truthfully, again, is it supposed to come with this figure? No, it's not. I'm really disappointed, though, that NECA didn't include a Necronomicon with this release of Ash, but we sort of have to make do with what we have. We'll put that down for the time being. The other thing that this particular figure has is a pretty cool-looking head sculpt. If you prefer your Ash to more be a stretched-out face, he does come included with that one as well. I've always had real tricky, difficult times trying to actually change the head out. It works on a ball joint, which seems pretty easy enough, but the size of the ball joint couldn't be any bit more obnoxious. Look at the size of that. I'm glad they actually went to more of a cylinder post system, because again, I have a real tough time trying to pull the head off to replace it with the alternate head. And for a figure this age and this time and how much this figure is going for now, I would hate to break the peg. Just that's simply the case of showing you guys what the figure looks like. So again, that's what the head sculpt looks like for the alternate head portrait. Would I ever display it with this one as good as it does look? No. It would certainly entertain the idea of getting another one, but again, at the cost that these NECA Cult Classics are going for now, specifically this guy right here, I'm probably not going to ever see myself picking up yet another one of these, simply just to give him the alternate head sculpt. Now, really, if you ask me, well, some of the Cult Classics certainly, well, I'll just put Ash down for a second. Well, some of the older Cult Classics do show their age. They're a little bit more dated. I have really no issues whatsoever when it comes to sculpting on these particular pieces, the Ashes specifically. I mean, that is a bang-on likeness. Stretched out, yes. But I mean, it's got some of the best details that I've seen for these older figures. And I think it could still run circles, honestly, around the stuff that they're releasing now for the Evil Dead line. I mean, just look at the tongue sticking out. Look at the back teeth even. They even painted the back of the teeth. That's pretty incredible. There's the back of it right there. But again, I can't really have the easiest of times replacing out the head. And the last thing I certainly would want to do is break that ball joint. So I'm just going to put it to the side. And again, we'll go back and look at the Ash with his defaulted head sculpt. Now, I just want to draw your attention to something. To be fair, these are from technically different films, yes, but they are still Ash. I'm going to bring in the one that NECA has released. This is from the 2-pack that we just recently had a look at. You can pretty much see, hopefully, the same thing that I'm implying in this review. Again, you just don't get the stuff that we were getting back in the day with the NECA Cult Classics. I mean, I personally feel there's such a depth to the medieval Ash that we just don't get here on the newer figures. I mean, if you look at the figures side by side, and I suppose it would have made more sense to take the Here That Fell from the Sky release from NECA Cult Classics, or the NECA toy line, to do a comparison back and forth, because that one's a little bit closer to this guy right here. But I mean, again, like, look at the difference in sculpting. There's nothing wrong with this one necessarily, but I feel like the likeness is so much stronger here in the Cult Classics release than the stuff that we're getting nowadays from NECA. Anyways, we're going to put that to the side. I certainly don't want to do a comparison left to right, but it certainly does show something, at least, that, I mean, really, there is some validity, I feel, to still picking up these older figures. I mean, look at the detailing done to Ash here on the scars, the cuts, the bruises, and of course the dirt all over his face. I mean, that is just one fantastic head sculpt. Still my favorite of all the things that NECA has put out. This is by far my favorite of the Ash figures. To be fair, though, he doesn't have, of course, your traditional Evil Dead 2 outfit. Of course, now this is medieval Ash, so he's sporting slightly different of a top. Of course, he's got the long flowing cape in the back that's just done in a softer plastic. Just to show you, though, I mean, like, NECA went the full mile to sculpt everything on the back. Even with the intended plan, even if you never had the plan of lifting this up, just to show you, I mean, there's just as much detailing hidden as the stuff that's actually exposed. I like the cross-hatching that they've done to the material here, added a slightly lighter gray to the dark gray coloring of the plastic. Again, with this particular Ash, gone is the chainsaw in favor of the robotic hand, which again was okay. I mean, I'm all for the chainsaw hand myself. But for this hand being something he incorporates into the third film, I feel like it's pretty nicely detailed from NECA's part. You can see all those individual bands done in a lighter gray, and you can see all the little pistons and things that would allow his fingers to move. The detailing, again, done very nicely on this figure. Obviously, I can't just simply praise this figure across the board. I'm sure I could easily do that. But I would say maybe one thing that the figure does lack a bit in is the fact that it's really pale in color. The colors seem very muted, both the coloring of his flesh tone, the coloring of his shirt, the pants, well, you get the idea. Everything is very faded and soft in color. Nothing has, of course, been affected by the sun, not being displayed in front of sunlight. But the coloring, just the way I picked up the figure in the first place, all had the very light, softer color than some of the stuff that we're getting again nowadays. Bringing in Ash once again from the 2-pack release. You can see the coloring is a little bit more vibrant here on the blues. Again, the blood, for example, is about the same. I'm not going to necessarily say that the older figure has dated blood stains. That's not simply the case at all. He's got quite a bit of blood actually on his sleeve, the front of his shirt. Nice detailing done to his belt, some blood all the way down his legs and right down into his boots, which do have some posability. For the figure's articulation, the head does rotate all the way around, whatever head you decide to be displayed with. Just again, like, look at the detailing done on the back of the hair. Praise, 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 praise. It's a good looking figure. I'm not going to dismiss that. The head does rotate back and forth in the way that if you want to have it slightly tilted to the side, you can also do it that way as well. Up, down, and all around. That's the way that Ash's head works. You can move the arms out. Now, the thing about these arms, these are Cult Classics. Dun, dun, dun. Clear pegs that they're using. As far as I know, these are clear pegs. They do look like they're a different color here, but I think that's just the hinge joint. I still think they are using the clear plastic for the connecting plugs, connecting the arms to the torso. So you want to be very careful that those accidentally don't break. The arms move forward and back, and unfortunately, because these older figures don't have a hinge in the elbow, you sort of just relegate it to the idea that you can just rotate the arms all the way around, which is okay, and that's fine, but I would have loved if these figures could have actually had elbow articulation. The hands rotate all the way around, whatever hand you decide to display them with. They've even got the watch there in place with a nice indentation of a scar, scratch done across his hand there. Nice blood done on the individual fingers as well. The figure also does have waist articulation, and just to wrap up the rest of it, because there's not much left to be said, he does also have articulation in the feet. You can rotate those boots all the way around. Hard-pressed, I would be to say, to find a figure released nowadays that NECA has put out that I feel complements or dethrones this. This is the, if you ask me, the definitive looking Ash. We'll go ahead and put him on his display stand for the time being. Yes, it would be hard to find a figure that actually has trumped this one. While it does have limitations, unfortunately, with its articulation, which is really the one thing that pulls from this figure and makes this figure then feel a slightly more dated. He doesn't have, like I said, the articulation in the legs that the newer figures all possess, but I do think where he makes up for it is what I still feel is a superior looking head sculpt. Some of the best that NECA has put out for Ash, and even again dethrones the stuff that they were putting out later on. Again, if I could find an Ash, I don't think one such exists, that has a better looking likeness and head sculpt to the one here released by Cult Classics. In final looks, truth be told, I've cheated a little bit and brought in the Necronomicon Ex Mortis that was packed in the 30th anniversary Dead by Dawn set, also from NECA Toys. Does it cheat in a way that I'm pulling it from the exact same company, simply just using it with a different figure? Yeah, I guess it's probably cheating. But to be fair, though, if you have the spine facing inward towards the thumb, it actually fits perfectly in his hand. It almost fits like a glove. I'm here all day. It seems like it should have really belonged there in the first place, yet for some strange reason, Cult Classics Ash never included a Necronomicon. Strange. He does come with a boomstick, and he comes with a really impressive display stand. Still to this day, I wish that NECA Toys would release more figures with diorama stands. Some of the stuff that, again, we were getting from Cult Classics was far ahead of its time. This is a great display. I suppose if you wanted to, you could probably be displaying it with the newer released Ashes, but I don't want to pull anything away from this figure being my all-time favorite release from Ash. The head sculpt, whatever head sculpt you decide to go with, this head sculpt or the stretched out face, is some of the best to this day that NECA has put out. I feel in a way that they've almost pulled back the likeness on Bruce Campbell, whereas they were pulling out some stellar stuff here, both with this one and the S-Smart Ash that was also under the Cult Classics banner. The only limitations on this particular figure that makes it feel, of course, outdated is that he doesn't have the much needed articulation to compete with some of the stuff that's coming out nowadays. A hinge in the elbow certainly could have come in handy to display him with the boomstick standing straight up or upright in the air. Articulation in the knees, articulation in the legs could certainly go, yes, a long way. But if you don't mind this guy just being a showcased statue, because he really isn't going to do much of anything else. You can move his arms, yes, but he's always going to have this pose. If my opinion means anything, I still think it's the best Ash figure that we've ever gotten from NECA Toys. And dare I even say it's one of the best Ash figures that we've ever gotten. If you disagree with me, certainly weigh in your comments down below. I always like reading your comments and talking shop, if you will, with fellow collectors. What do you think is your favorite? Or what do you think is the favorite Ash figure that's ever come out? What do you think is the best likeness? Let me know down below in the comments section. In the meantime, we were trekking back, going back to the past, and we were looking at the Cult Classics. This was the medieval Ash, also from NECA Toys. A much better head sculpt and likeness to Bruce Campbell, if you ask me. If you guys are new to this channel, make sure you suggest to yourself, your brain tell yourself to hit that subscribe button on the way out the door. Also, be sure to hit that bell notification and stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of videos coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.